First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I will tell you right now that this is a brand new presentation, and I am so pumped to give it to you guys. So, yeah, brace yourself, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Anybody know what this number is right here?
It's big.
I can tell you that it's not my bank account. That's for sure. But what I can tell you is that this is the number of websites that contain a Google Analytics tracking script for analytics. 99% is the number of accounts that I have access to that when I originally got access to it was installed incorrectly. And not necessarily incorrectly, it's not that it wasn't tracking data, it's not that it was the tracking script wasn't there, but Google Analytics out of the box, you take the little the Google Analytics tracking code and you place it on your website, and boom, you pull up your reports, it shows you how many visitors you have, and it's great. But there's so much more to this data if you put in the right efforts to make sure that you're tagging it properly, making sure that you're bringing Google Analytics to the next level. Anybody know what this number is? 93%? 93% of people think that they're better than the average driver. That is impossible. That's not possible. And so when it comes to Google Analytics, I find a lot of people will tell me, yeah, we've got Google Analytics, we're tracking all this stuff, it's set up perfectly, and once I get in there, I realize, no, you're the 7%. You're below the average. So what I want to do today, my 99% number, I want to make you guys the 1%. The 1% that's really bringing Google Analytics to the next level, making sure that you're not missing anything. And no, not like that. I'm not going to make the 1% like that. So, thank you. So being in analytics, things tend to get really complicated really fast. And this has made me really appreciate simplicity. I like taking a step back and let's think about this in the most simplistic way we possibly can. And ultimately, when it comes to analytics, really all we're doing is we're trying to tell a story. As an SEO, you're trying to tell yourself, you're trying to build the story. You're looking at the data and you're saying, this keyword is performing this way, this campaign is performing this way. And analytics is all about telling that story. I want to show you a little metaphor here, and by the way, I invented this. Not the maze, the metaphor. So here's your maze, here's your website, and the visitor lands on the web page, so they start at the top, and ultimately, if they make it all the way through the maze, you have a conversion. Somebody has done something you want them to do. But oftentimes what ends up happening is, if Google Analytics is not installed correctly, all of a sudden your website starts to look like this. You're missing pieces, you're missing data, you don't have the information to tell the whole story. Sure, you can tell that the visitor landed on the page, but you don't know what happened right there. You know they converted, but you don't know what happened right there. So maybe that's, you're not tracking your outbound links. You have no idea how to tell if people are leaving or clicking on your outbound links. Maybe you're not tracking a newsletter sign up. Maybe you're not tracking social interactions. Maybe you're not tracking comments that are occurring on the website. Or worse, the worst case scenario, you're not tracking conversions either, which is really possible. One of the things I forgot to mention the 99% number that I showed up there. Rewind. I work at a social media agency. I run the measurement department over there, and I do a lot of analytics work. And a study came out a couple of months ago from the e-consultancy, I think it was BRD Media did it, and what they found is that they did a survey of 500 different major e-commerce websites, retailers, online retailers. And when they went in and did a formal audit of their Google Analytics, of their web analytics capabilities, they found that 80% of those online retailers did not have analytics set up right. They were inflating data, they weren't tracking the right data, they were missing data completely. That's what I want today to show you how to avoid. So, let the fun begin. So, when it comes to tagging, to me, really what this is, and this is my definition of it, the way I look at it is about generating additional data with your analytics. It's about getting a deeper understanding of the things that are happening on your website. So what I want to talk to you today is how to get to that 1%, or what are the steps, what are the things you need to be doing to get better data in your analytics. First thing that you want to do is you want to audit your website. You really want to take the time to go through and ask yourself, am I getting all of the information I'm looking for? The way I think about it is, if you can click on the website anywhere, you can track that with Google Analytics. There's so many, I mean, any place you click, whether it's a comment box, whether it's a Facebook like, a Twitter button, whatever it is, you can track that information. You can even track, with navigation, you've got navigation across the top and you've got navigation across the bottom. With proper tagging, you're going to be able to identify which navigation are people really using. You're going to know if what you put down there is really performing or not. So basically what this comes down to when you're doing the audit, which isn't necessarily tagging, but you're trying to identify the black spots in your maze. You're trying to identify the pieces that you're missing to avoid this. We've all heard of garbage in, garbage out. The way I look at it is nothing in, nothing out. If you're not tracking the data, if you have those black spots and you don't have that information, you're not tracking that data, you can't even get to garbage in, garbage out because there's no garbage there. So, events. Batman. A coworker asked him, I was like, hey, what's a good thing to put on an event slide, like Google Analytics? He's like, I don't know, what about like a circus tent? That's like an event? No, Batman's better. He bet me I couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. I just made $20, paid speaking event now. So, events, think of these as the actions that happen on the page. There's so many things we can do on a website where we click on it, the URL, the page doesn't change. And when the page doesn't change, if you have a basic installation of Google Analytics, it's not going to track that interaction. It will not do it out of the box. So with events, you can go through and start tagging the different elements of the site to make sure you're getting that data. So here's an actual, this is actually a client example of mine, and here's what looks to be like a pretty standard e-commerce page. Obviously, we're going to be interested in knowing if people are buying or not, but what you're going to have here is what you're going to find is that there's so many things that happen on this website that are not being tracked right now. You have breadcrumbs at the top of the page. Google Analytics isn't going to tell you out of the box whether that's being tracked or not, or people are clicking on that. You've got a price match guarantee not being tracked. You've got previous and next item not being tracked out of the box. Pictures. We've got tabs underneath, so dynamic tabs, and we've got information on the right side. We've got social links, and we also have add to cart and add to wish list. Out of the box, those things do not track. So this report is actually from my company's website, SMCpros. I've got about 350 different events that are being tracked on a basic agency page. Those are things that do not happen out of the box. So here's a small sample here. You'll see there's up in the top, the 34, you'll see the click logo. I know that's the home page, that's the logo up at the top, so people are clicking on that versus using the home button. I know that. I know if people are clicking on YouTube videos. I know if they're looking for any click that happens on the website, I know about it. And what's really funny, I noticed this when I was making this presentation. You can see my page right here. And then if you go like 3 up, you see something cool right there. There's a Rickroll on the bottom of our website. The Rickroll is more popular than me. Figure that out. But the idea here is so you have this information, you have this event level data now. Now it's your job to segment it out. So if I want to know, I want to see how are people, who's getting Rickrolled, I can segment that out and I can figure that out. That's what segments is about. It's about segmenting the data, understanding what the clicks are, and going from there. Custom variables, the Robin of tagging. I didn't make any money off of that one, sorry. Or I guess not sorry, don't feel bad for me is what I'm trying to say. So custom variables, think of this as a cookie you can use with Google Analytics to basically signal to you later that this person has performed a particular action or has done something on the website. It's additional code. So what this does is, this is another client example, it's a wallbedoutlet.com, and they sell Murphy beds, they're pretty cool. And what we were interested in knowing with this client example, we were interested in knowing if people interact with the Build-A-Bed system, so if you click on the colors up there, which by the way, all of those are being tracked with events, I know exactly which things people are clicking on in the Build-A-Bed system, but we're able to basically tag this visitor as having interacted with the Build-A-Bed, and what I can answer with that What I can answer with that information is, does that lead to sales? So the other example is where I use another custom variable is to request a sample. Here's somebody who, buying a bed online, buying a Murphy bed online is really a challenging thing, especially for like a large purchase. It's just hard to whip out the credit card, so it's challenging. So one of the things that we do is we allow people to order a sample of the material to see that it isn't, you know, IKEA-like. It's nice, it's good stuff. So what we were interested in knowing is, do the requests for samples, do they actually lead to conversions? Do they lead to sales? Does it impact that process? And what we were able to find is for example, is that the request a sample, I don't have the slide here that shows the e-commerce data, but this is showing me that people, here's 8 interactions, Build-A-Bed interactions, that requested a sample. And I thought this was really interesting because we see that we have 36 requests for samples, yet only 8 of them used this system up here. So now what I'm interested in is, what is the quality of the visitor? What's the whole reason this came up is that some of the samples, we were afraid that it wasn't quality visitors who were requesting them. By using custom variables, by being able to identify the returning visitors, I can answer, are these people who are requesting samples, are they coming back to the website, and what are they doing? Promise is the last Batman reference right here. We've already touched on goals already once before. Goals are everything. When it comes to Google Analytics, when it comes to really getting the most out of Google Analytics, it's imperative that you have these goals set up. But not just goals, you need really, really, really smart goals. And here's what I mean by that. So here's a business, TrueScribe, another client of mine. They do whiteboard animation. And what we do with this one, with this particular client example, is obviously it's not an e-commerce site, but I track it with e-commerce Google Analytics code, which is something that doesn't happen out of the box. So basically what we do is, when somebody downloads a white paper, when they request for contact, when they perform specific actions, we'll actually fire the Google Analytics e-commerce tracking code. The reason we do this is because we get really cool stuff like this. So here's the data for people who have downloaded white papers from TrueScribe. So we see that most of them happens in the first day, but we also see that 9% take more than a day, and it allows you to drill into that further. We can start to see the different channels for downloading a white paper. We're not looking at it as just a single event, we're looking at it as, what is the process to download that white paper? And this is going to enable you to make really, really smart decisions in terms of which SEO campaigns are working, which paid advertising campaign is working, and what are the actions that the traffic is doing on your site. And the whole idea is that when you start tagging, when you start adding events and you start adding custom variables, you start to eliminate the boxes. You start to get a fuller view of your website so you can make smarter decisions. And with that, welcome to the 1%. Tag your ed. Any questions? Yes?
Can you recommend any sources for good naming conventions for event tracking, goals, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Like naming, in terms of the event, like the code for the event, in terms of like the naming convention for it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So the way I look, so event code is basically broken down into 3. I'm assuming that's probably what you're going to use the most. That's what I typically use the most. Custom variables are important, but I use events a lot more. And there's basically 3 levels. Think of it as a hierarchy. You've got the category, action, and label. And really, it really doesn't matter what the naming convention is, as long as you maintain the hierarchy in the same way across all of the different categories. Because what ends up happening, I'm sure, as we start to talk about APIs, if you don't have those set up in a way that makes sense, when you try to extract data out there, it's going to be really, really, really messy. And so really for the naming conventions, I typically use things like download, click, navigation. Really, I find it really helpful to actually whiteboard all of that out, basically lay all of the different categories out, and then make sure you stick with those, and you also keep the case the same. Otherwise, it's going to make your reports really messy. Does that help? Cool. Any questions? Yeah?
How long does the latency last for Google Analytics for a cookie?
Yeah, there's two pieces of that. 30 days is typically what is the standard. Obviously, when they return to the site, that cookie, there's different things that happen there. but also we haven't quite figured out the cross-channel piece yet, so it's a little messy there, but yeah. Any questions? Yeah, over here.
Tagging properly is a major pain.
Yep.
And I spent a lot of time in the weeds looking after it. Now, out of the box, does Google Analytics use asynchronous code?
Out of the box, yes.
Out of the box, yes.
Yep.
Okay, and what are the advantages of asynchronous over synchronous? Just for people to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally they're referred to as the async code and then the traditional code. And if you haven't updated your code in a while, there's a chance that you may have basic tracking code. There's a couple different things you get from it. Number one, asynchronous is supposed to make your website a little bit quicker in terms of loading, so it's less resource intensive on the browser. Honestly, I don't think it's enough to really make a difference. That's why I wouldn't switch. The reason I switch to async code, if it's not there, comes down to there's reports in different pieces like multi-channel funnels, and also site speed, and some of the additional reports in Google Analytics require the asynchronous code. It's really important to stay on top of how updated your code is. They're now doing, I can't remember exactly what they're calling. I think it's in-page analytics now, but they added an additional piece of code there to make the yeah. So yep. So the code is changing. I never use the async code out of the box just the way it is. I'm always adjusting bounce rates, setting site speed. There's so much. I mean, I use a lot of jQuery to automatically tag things. So for example, if a site has a bunch of PDFs on it, I've got code that'll automatically bind to the PDFs or the social links. So there's ways you can make that easier, but it's definitely out of the box. The code is, in my opinion, it's kind of limiting. You don't get the full picture. You never do.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Yeah.
What do you think of the new Google Tag Manager?
Yeah, good. I've spent way too much time playing around with it, trying to get it to work. Not that it doesn't work. It's limiting in a couple different ways. The Tag Manager is great when you've got when you need to worry about going through a development channel. So, and what I mean by that is I've got a few clients who are a lot larger, and so for me to get approval for like code changes is really difficult. You need to go through a testing process, and it just gets really messy really quickly. But the problem with the Tag Manager is that there's still going to be elements in terms of tagging that you're going to have to go and do. So Tag Manager does a great job of handling your basic tracking code, but it doesn't help you with the tagging on the website. You're still going to need to go through and identify those different events. So as much as it solves one problem, it kind of leaves the tagging issue. The Tag Manager, that's what's kind of funny, it's kind of ironic actually, it's not going to help you with that. So I would use it if you've got a development, a gap there, so it's harder for you to make code changes.
Yeah, is it more for like sites that don't have analytics on them at all, or if let's say the site's already got analytics on it and maybe it's not on every page, or maybe they have conversion tags set up for AdWords but they don't have analytics tags. Are you able to use the Tag Manager to kind of then just update everything, or should you stay away from it if it's already got kind of like halfway done? Or
yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Boy, in that instance, you definitely don't want to run the risk of having two Google Analytics code on a page, because that'll really throw you off. In that situation, if it's a large website, a Tag Manager makes a lot of sense. In fact, I've got a client who's doing an Adobe Omniture Site Catalyst implementation, and the development cycle was so long that I use Google Tag Manager to actually run the S code for Omniture. So that's where I use it, and it's when you have development challenges is when I would use it. Large sites, development challenges, that's when you're going to want to use it, but you're still going to have to do some tagging. Yeah.
If you're custom tagging events on like an e-commerce page or a site that's got thousands and thousands of pages, can you apply those codes to the template at the template level, or do you go in and actually tag each link manually?
Yeah. It kind of depends on the circumstance of what it is and how the template is set up. So for example, if you've got a standard footer in like a WordPress site, you've got a standard footer and you've got your outbound links and your social icons down there. it's easy enough to go into there and just tag it just there, and then you're good for the whole site. So if you can get away with it that way, that's how I would do it. But what I wouldn't do is, you don't, if it's a larger site, that's where I typically use like jQuery or something like that to bind to the events. If there's like PDFs throughout the site, I had a site with like something crazy, like 250 YouTube videos throughout the entire website. And so for that one, there's no way I was going to go through and tag every single one of those. So that's where you're going to want to build a piece of code or figure out on the back end of how you can bind to those elements automatically. Otherwise, you will spend forever tagging. And we don't want that. As much as it's cool, we don't want that. So, cool. Anything else? Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.